The Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. Chapter 65. The Committee on Magical Messages. The walk to McGonagall's office was quick and mostly silent. Students were beginning to move about the corridors and stared wide-eyed at the group of Aurors flanking Hermione, Draco, and Theo, led by the headmistress. Harry edged up to Hermione and tried to ask her about the scene in the Slytherin common room, but backed off under McGonagall's glare. Draco, walking beside Hermione, brushed her hand with his. "This isn't how I'd imagined our morning," he whispered. Hermione had to agree. This hadn't been her plan either. She'd hoped for a little more time before sneaking back to Gryffindor Tower, time for maybe another... She felt her cheeks heat. It was tremendously embarrassing, being caught in the Slytherin dungeons with Draco before 7 a.m. by Harry, Kingsley, McGonagall, and 2 Aurors. Not to mention Blaise. And Theo. Merlin, why not bring in Ernie, Astoria, and Justin Finch-Fletchley? Hermione glared at Kingsley's back. This was all his fault. Upon reaching the headmistress's office, McGonagall lost no time packing Drabin and Croft off by Floo powder, leaving the usual magic blood message committee and its special guests there. Theo made a small production of escorting Hermione to a striped armchair and taking the other one. McGonagall seated herself behind her desk, and the other 3 wizards stood around and looked annoyed. Kingsley pulled out what appeared to be his own copy of Theo's arrest warrant. "First of all, Mr. Nott." "Lord Nott," Theo reminded him. He might be dressed in student's robes, but he obviously had no intention of playing the role of McGonagall's ward, no matter what Hermione advised. His left hand lay prominently on his chair arm, displaying his signet ring. "The Ministry has evidence of your involvement in the threatening messages at Hogwarts, Lord Nott," Kingsley said. Pulled out another scroll. "Azkaban documents logged a visit by you at Lucius Malfoy on Thursday, September 6, 2 days before your return to Hogwarts." He handed the scroll to Theo. "Is that not your signature, Lord Nott?" Theo unrolled the parchment, and Hermione craned her neck to see a column of magically shrouded signatures, except for the singer-scribbled name of Theodore Nott. She looked at Theo, whose face was impassive, but said nothing. Theo wasn't Draco. He wouldn't appreciate her interference. She thought back to their dinner in Hogsmeade. Obviously, Theo had been less than candid when telling the story of his arrival in Britain. "I haven't agreed to any interrogation or seen any evidence linking me to the messages," Theo said. "Perhaps if you would like to submit your questions in writing, I can respond when I have the time." Hermione almost groaned. Theo was playing the arrogant entitlement card again. "Mr. Nott," McGonagall said, with a slight emphasis on the lack of title, "I ask you to conduct yourself as a respectful member of the Hogwarts community." "Theo," Hermione said. She had to convince the man to stand down. "This is serious. The Ministry has evidence linking Lucius to the dyed mudblood messages." Everyone winced. "What kind of evidence?" Theo asked. "Hermione, you can't," Kingsley began. "Do you want his cooperation?" she asked the head Auror. "Then you'll have to tell him what's going on." "He's hoping if I'm kept in the dark I'll incriminate myself," Theo said calmly. "What if he agreed to take Veritaserum?" Hermione asked. "Same process as with Draco." Both Kingsley and Harry blanched at the very idea. "Oh, no," Harry said. "I'm not going through that again." "Then you're free to leave, Harry," she snapped, then turned to Theo. "Would you, Theo?" she asked, looking into those cool green eyes. "If we explained the evidence against you, would you take Veritaserum? All questions would be written out beforehand. I'd approve them." "Don't do it," Draco said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. "It's a helpless feeling," he went on. "You're stripped bare for all to see." Hermione put her hand on Theo's. "I'll help you," she said, pushing away the memory of the trapped, hopeless look in Draco's eyes as truth spilled out of his mouth. Oh, it was a horrid potion, but without it they could be here all day. "Perhaps," Theo said, considering, "if you approve the questions." He looked at Kingsley. "But first I want to know about the evidence against Lucius." Kingsley nodded at Hermione. Draco and I did some research, she said. Those messages are the result of some kind of blood spell on the castle itself. We don't yet know why. How do you know it's Lucius' blood? Theo asked. Because Hermione and I brewed an experimental potion that identified the blood as my father's. Draco cut in. It's a perfect match. But of course Lucius is in Azkaban, Hermione continued, so someone must have brought the blood here to the castle. Theo's face was white. You always think I went to Azkaban, picked up a pint of Lucius' blood? He shook his head. No, you probably think I cut him with a smuggled knife while we talked, then brought the blood back here and cast a curse to kill all Muggleborns. We're not sure it's a curse, Hermione said. We don't know what triggers the letters or what it does. The messages make it fairly clear, Draco snapped, but Hermione wasn't listening. If it wasn't a curse, then I'll do it, Theo said, breaking into her thoughts. I'll take the Veritas serum, and when we're finished, he glared at Kingsley. I'll expect a full apology. McGonagall moved away from her desk just as before, allowing Kingsley to sit and write out his questions. Draco and Harry fidgeted and traded scowls. Theo sat stone-faced and silent. Kingsley finished and nodded at Hermione, who replaced him at the desk. She struck out 2 questions and added 2 more before handing the parchment to Kingsley, who produced a small vial. Half a vial only, Kingsley, she warned, returning to her chair beside Theo. Theo drank half the vial and handed it back to the head aura, his expression unchanged except for some tightness around the jaw. Your name, please, Kingsley said softly. Lord Theodore Ignatius Nott. Did you visit Lucius Malfoy at Azkaban on September 6th? Yes. What was the purpose of your visit? I wanted to talk about my father, Theo said almost tonelessly. Shut his mouth firmly, but the serum obviously forced him to continue speaking. Lucius Malfoy was his closest associate. My father told me once, if anything happened to him, to seek out Lucius. And you obeyed this order? Kingsley said. Why did you visit Lucius, having taken such pains to distance yourself from your family and their values? Theo looked bleak. I don't know, he said. My father sent no message for me, no note, nothing before he was executed. I thought perhaps he had told Lucius something. Theo shook his head slightly. I know he hated my mother and he hated me, but he was my father. Hermione blinked, her suddenly blurry eyes, suppressing the instinct to take Theo's hand. Kingsley cleared his throat and adopted a businesslike tone. According to the logs, your visit lasted 20 minutes. What did Lucius Malfoy say? What didn't he say? Theo responding, regaining a bit of confidence. He ranted against the Ministry, Hogwarts, incompetent Death Eaters, Harry Potter and his friends, even his own family. What did Lucius Malfoy say? Kingsley repeated, technically staying within his list of questions, although Hermione narrowed her eyes at him. That Narcissa and Draco had gone soft and mudblood assassins were lying in wait for both of them. Theo gave Hermione an apologetic look, but she just rolled her eyes. The mudblood assassins. That would be a good name for a rock band. Finally, I had enough, Theo said, glaring at Kingsley. I told Lucius that he and his precious son threw their lives down the toilet for fucking Voldemort. I said both he and Draco deserved everything they got. Their stupidity and greed had helped to almost destroy the wizarding world. Looked at Draco resentfully. I still believe that. Did Malfoy ever talk about your father? Kingsley asked. Kingsley! Hermione cried. I didn't approve that question. But it was too late. Theo choked and tried to keep his mouth shut, but failed. Lucius said my father considered me his greatest disappointment, and the 2 of them enjoyed many happy hours plotting how to disinherit me. Theo admitted. But my father hated his brothers even more, so they reluctantly gave up the idea. He sighed. Lucius and my father wanted me to swear on my signet ring that I would marry a witch from the sacred 28 and raise my son in The old words. "Don't you dare ask, Kingsley," Hermione asked. "It's none of your business." "But Hermione, the always that implies—" Kingsley began. "It's fine, Hermione. I didn't swear the oath." Theo cut in. "I had my own plans." Kingsley nodded and returned to his list. "Did Lucius Malfoy mention the blood messages?" "No." "Did you write the bloody messages on the castle walls?" Kingsley asked. "No," Theo said. "Did you cast any spell or take any action that could result in those messages appearing on the walls?" he asked. That was Hermione's question, and so was the next. "No, I was as surprised as anybody else at their appearance." "Do you know who may have written or cast a spell or taken any action resulting in those messages?" "No." "Did you at any point deliver anyone's blood to Hogwarts?" Theo shook his head, looking a bit ill. "No, not Lucius, not anyone's." He turned to Hermione. "Hermione, I had nothing to do with this." Now she did put her hand on his ring smooth and heavy under her palm. "I know." "Why did you return to Hogwarts in September?" Kingsley asked. Final question. Hermione had debated whether to allow it, but decided that the reason for his presence in the castle was relevant. "I had a family name to redeem in the eyes of the wizarding world. With my father dead, my maternal grandmother, Lady Gretchen, and I thought I could restore my reputation." Kingsley's face was cold. "How did you plan to do that?" "Kingsley!" Hermione cried again, but it was too late. Next time I'm cursing Kingsley's parchment, she thought. One wrong word and he'll break out in bull spelling sneak. Thea's face turned red, but he was compelled to answer. "My grandmother and I thought a strategic marriage." He choked out. He looked at Hermione. "A war hero. Brightest witch of her age, a formidable political force if she only knew how to wield power." He frowned. "But Draco outmaneuvered me." The entire room stared at Theo, aghast. Draco trembled with rage. Hermione's jaw dropped. "How could you, Theo?" She clapped her hand over her mouth in horror, realizing she'd asked the question. "How could I try to marry you? Very easily," he answered, unsmiling. "A beautiful, sexy woman like you. I even gave up Astoria." Hermione leaped out of her seat, her hand still to her mouth. "You are not going anywhere near Hermione," Draco hissed. "I second that," Harry said, looking absolutely livid. He stepped forward, wand out. "Harry," Kingsley said, putting a hand on the assistant Aura's arm. "You are not to speak to her, or touch her, or even look at her." Harry snarled at Theo. Even Draco looked taken aback by the viciousness in Harry's voice, and Hermione had expected the Slytherin to be throttling the accused by now. "Harry!" Hermione had gotten her own emotions under control. "You are not helping." "We have gone far afield of our purpose here," McGonagall's cold voice cut in. "I don't care to explore Mr. Nott's questionable motives in his personal affairs. At Aura Shacklebolt, is it fair to say that my student is no longer under suspicion regarding the blood messages?" "Yes." Kingsley rolled up his quill and tucked it into his robes, his posture sagging. "Another dead end, I'm afraid." He waved his wand, and the restaurant vanished in a puff of smoke. "Then I recommend that everyone, except for Mr. Nott, leaves this office," McGonagall said. "And at Aura Shacklebolt, I request that Assistant Aura Potter remains in the castle, but no other Auras may enter without my permission, including yourself. The castle wards will now prevent it. I'm also rescinding your flu privileges after your departure." "I understand, Headmistress. My apologies," Kingsley said. "Apologies to you as well, Lord Nott." The last sentence dripped with contempt. Then Kingsley turned to Hermione, who now stood between Harry and Draco, holding onto both their hands. "I sincerely apologize to all three of you who've done nothing but try to help. The resources of the Aura's office are at your disposal, Hermione, and I'd understand if you'd like to press charges against Drebin or Croft, or myself." That's not necessary, Hermione said absently, still staring at Theo, who sat with his face downcast. She thought back to the Gryffindor party, to their dates in Hogsmeade, their kisses in alcoves and storage rooms, their breakup in his bedroom, the classroom confrontation, the attack at the hunting shack, his apologies. Each encounter stripped away another wail. Perhaps now she was meeting the real Theodonot.
I suggest you three go on to breakfast,
McGonagall said after Kingsley flew back to the ministry.
I'll remain here with Mr. Nott until the serum wears off.
Hermione let go of Harry's hand, but retained Draco's, or rather, Draco refused to release hers as they walked down to breakfast. As they entered the entrance hall, Draco drew her toward the house hourglass cabinet. Harry just rolled his eyes and left them to enter the great hall. Theo had a plan, Draco. Hermione was trembling. I thought he really liked me, but it was just a plan. Shh, Draco said, dropping his back and taking her in his arms. Yes, he had a plan, but he liked you too. Hermione leaned her cheek against his robes, allowing her own burrowed back to slide to the floor. Relief flooded her veins that she was standing in this hall with Draco and not in McGonagall's office with Theo, learning the truth at last about her boyfriend. Did you know about Theo and Astoria? She asked him. I suspected it. They were quite cozy at the beginning of the year, Draco said. Now that it's confirmed, maybe I can get my mother off my back about this so-called betrothal. I don't want to look at him or talk to him or... Let's leave Hogwarts, Draco said. Tonight, let's go to the chateau. It's quiet there. There's a library. He took her face in gentle hands, tilting her chin upwards. You can try to free me, if you like. And there's Seamy Fishing Village nearby with all kinds of suspicious characters to defend. A library? Hermione asked, still sniffling a bit. All in French, of course, but there are translation spells. Hermione frowned. Translation spells are frequently inaccurate and fail to account for context. Draco rolled his eyes. Then I will personally read the books to you in English if you will only deign to spend this weekend in a luxurious chateau in southern France crammed with history and perhaps allow a little ravishing by me on the side. How would we get there? Hermione asked. Wait, let me guess, you have a portkey. Draco nodded. There's an empty inkpot on my desk. Now Hermione rolled her eyes. These purebloods and their portkeys to ancestral castles. He brushed her cheeks with his fingers. Will you come? He asked. The happiest time in my childhood were there. I went every summer with my mother. He kissed Hermione lightly. We can make our own memories. No fireworks, Hermione said, or dancers, or yachts. Certainly not. Hermione put her hand over his against her cheek. I'd love to come, she whispered. Draco bent his head and kissed her, pressing her against the cabinet. By the time they entered the great hall, breakfast was nearly over. The entrance incited much whispering, and when the two of them approached the Gryffindor table, the hall's murmuring rose to a fevered pitch. Harry sat alone at the far end, violently ripping apart a scone. From the look on his face, no wonder no one was sitting near him. Hermione and Draco settled opposite the assistant Aura and opened their napkins. I fucking hate Slytherins, Harry announced, spots of anger still in his cheeks. It's all right, Harry, Hermione said, adding a scone to her own plate. Really? It's not all right, Harry snapped. Snakes trolling the school looking for witches to clean up their sorry names. Draco's face darkened. I hope you're not implying Godric, no, Harry said. Once the prophet finds out about you two, the whole wizarding world will go spare. I'll get a bodyguard, Malfoy. Hermione took Draco's hand. It will be fine, she said. You'll help, won't you, Harry? Harry? But Harry's attention had shifted to the great hall doors. Following his gaze, Hermione saw Ginny leaving the hall with Neville. Hermione cut her eyes over to the Slytherin table and noticed Blaise watching as well. Blaise won't give up, will he? Hermione asked Draco. The Slytherin shook his head. He is convinced that Ginevra is running from her feelings. Harry glared at Draco. What's that bastard's angle anyway? Another marriage scheme? Where's the political gain for the Zabini? There's a blood traitor to one side of Wizarding Society and another pureblood to the other. Draco sneered back. A mite thick, aren't you, Potter? You don't see it. Ginevra is a war hero. Beautiful, powerful, glamorous, capable of providing pureblood heirs. Hell, she's an athlete as well, being recruited by the Harpies, I hear. Blaise would be taking a gamble on how she matures, of course, but early marriage means a chance to shape her into the Zabini he wants. Harry slammed down his glass. That, he snarled, is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard, and I had to hear Nott's fucked up plans for Hermione. Ginny is not something to be shaped and controlled. He pointed a fork at the blonde. And Malfoy, if you think for one moment that you can control. Draco smirked. Unlike Blaise and Theo, and I might add the Weasel and your humble self, I would not be so stupid. How dare you compare me to those? Of course, Hermione cried suddenly. I've been such a fool. It's all right, Draco said magnanimously, taking her hand. I forgive you for dating Theo. What? No. Hermione had stopped listening to the conversation when Harry had mentioned a scene in McGonagall's office, and then something Draco had said. She pulled her hand out of Draco's and jumped to her feet. Stay here, both of you. Stay here and, argue some more. I can't sit here with Potter. I have class. He gave Harry a thin smile. And I have ancient runes. Harry glared, but Hermione just gave off a huff of impatience. Just stay here, both of you. She dashed away from the table in time to meet up with Leela at the doors. Leela, you have a free period right now, correct? She asked. She'd heard prefects complaining about Slytherin first years causing trouble on Friday morning.
Yes, Miss Granger,
Girl said calmly.
I have some very interesting plans for the next hour.
Hermione purposely didn't ask. Plausible deniability. Well, Leela, I'd like to ask you to do something interesting for me instead, as long as you can be discreet.
I am quite discreet,
Leela said.
Certainly more discreet than you and Mr. Malfoy.
Hermione couldn't disagree, so she just let the girl out of the great hall. Fine. Now, here's the first thing I need you to do. To be continued. Next up, Harry bickers with Hermione. Leela approves of Draco. And yes, a mystery is solved. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Gloriana set by ThebeMoon. If you'd like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, or AO3.